Yeah.
But when I
Do
hop in
it.
to tell you about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which was from 2004, all
Oof.
those all those years ago, what a time period that was for me in my life. So, so it is about when their relationship turns sour, a couple undergoes a medical procedure to have each other erased from their memories forever, and is directed by Michelle Gondry. And yeah, it is boring boy meets quirky girl, and he loves her spontaneity, and she
Mhm.
loves how he loves her.
Yeah.
But when quirky girl is revealed to actually be impulsive and reckless girl, and boring boy is actually mean and judgmental boy, they break up. And he,
Classic.
we've all been there.
Mhm.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is an incredibly creative exploration of memory and relationships, and how much of love is the memories built together and our raw feelings for one another. It kind of explores, where the line is between those things. And in creating this script, screenwriter Michel Gondry said, "Soon I had a completely different idea of how I should do Eternal Sunshine. It became about memories, how we are our memories, and how our memories affect our lives. Losing them before you die is tragic." So definitely understanding the importance of preserving your memories. But also, I mean, trauma just straight up erases those
Mhm.
sometimes. So this is kind of like you're forcing trauma to do that, which is kind of interesting. The
Yeah.
film follows Joel and Clementine, an unlikely pair in the midst of a recoupling, a fiery breakup, and their very beginning. And while
Mhm.
mourning his breakup, Joel is informed that his impulsive ex girlfriend went through a procedure to erase him from her memories and to forget him and their life together. And Joel decides, in a moment of his own anguish and despair, to get the procedure himself. Um, so this like it's told out of order, which is really fun. Because when you first see them, you don't realize it's the second time they
Mhm.
meet. So, and then we get to kind of like go backwards and watch how they fell apart, and then we watch how they fell in love, and it's
Yeah.
just a really fun kind of backtracking and just showcase of relationships, which is kind of like it really did remind me a lot of 500 Days of Summer, and that approach of like the moving in time where it's just like this day, and it's like
Mhm.
a early day where it's like cute and they do these things and they're in love, and then it's like a later day and it's like those same things that we do. Now there's this different tone, there's a different color theme. Like when we first see Joel, it's all blue, and as soon as
Mhm.
Clementine comes into his life, now it's
Color
bright. And
returns, yeah.
yeah, colors here, it's a bright time. She is representing this opportunity for happiness for him. And so in a lot of times, in a lot of ways, Eternal Sunshine of Spotless Mind is a twisted version of the rom com. Because it shows us what happens after the meet cute, after they go through the initial struggles to be together. Now they're together. What happens, like post happily ever after?
Yeah.
And the film shows us the flaws in the character tropes that we've come to find cozy. And years before the term was coined, Clementine dismantles the manic pixie dream girl idea. Nathan Rabin, who initially kind of described this trope, described it as a bubbly, shallow, cinematic creature that exists solely in the fevered imaginations of sensitive writer directors to teach broodingly soulful young men to embrace life and its infinite mysteries and adventures.
Mhm.
We see those in what you would imagine uh, Zoe Deschanel's character would be in 500 Days of Summer, although she isn't. Um,
Mhm.
you see that in John Green's teen reads. You see that in Elizabethtown, Kirsten Dunst,
Mhm.
um, and Zoe Deschanel a lot,
Yeah.
like a lot, poor thing. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's definitely like a trope that happened. It just wasn't labeled before, like by the time Clementine was out. But
Yeah.
she is like actively like personifying and also dismantling it, which is really interesting. Like I think of her hair color changing as like Scott Pilgrim, like how he
Yeah.
remarks every time she changes her hair, and I'm just like, it's nothing to do with you, but she's so quirky.
Mhm.
And those first glimpses of Clementine feel much like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. She wears bright sweaters and she changes her hair and she's loud and attention seeking, just what Joel needs as he muses to himself about how bored he is, and how maybe, he's missing out on life.
Mhm.
He kind of explains like, "Oh, I'm very boring. Like, look at my journal. There's nothing in here." And she just asks like, "How does that make you feel?" Like, I am anxious that I'm not doing everything I should be doing with my life at all times.
Mhm.
And that is something that he just like never verbalized. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something that he needed. And so that's kind of where the manic pixie dream girl comes from, is this idea that like she's just this force that propels him into a better place. And she's just this tool for his betterment. And
Mhm.
just this like, she could be quirky and weird and dance in the rain. Uh, and so now he can let loose a little and not be as,
Yeah.
he could along came Polly himself.
Yeah.
Um
There's so many movies that do it.
I'm like, they're all coming. Complaining that he complains about how sand is overrated, it's just small rocks,
Yep.
and Valentine's Day was made to sell candy and make people feel really bad about themselves. He's just musing the whole time. He's just like, I'm miserable.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, she's got a nice sweater. It's so bright. What a crazy sweater. Um, I'm sad.
Yeah.
And then she's like, "Hi, I've had lots of alcohol. I am
I
unhinged."
am
And he's
so
like,
fun.
cool." As the story progresses, we learn that these quirks are actually veiled red flags of Clementine. So what
Yes.
were seen as like her, fun dance in the rain times are actually like, wait a second, of course there's more. She's not just this one vision. Like, she's not one-sided. We have depth to her, we have a history for her, we have things that she does. So in an article on flavorwire.com titled "Eternal Sunshine Destroyed the Manic Pixie Dream Girl Stereotype Before It Even Existed," writer Allison Herman explains the disillusionment of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl in the film, saying, "As we're taken through the lowlights of their relationship, the audience learns that the booze she pours into her coffee isn't an endearing quirk. It's a sign of the drinking problem that led her to total Joel's car. She's mercurial, irresponsible, and resentful of Joel to the point of being outright nasty. And of course, she's repeatedly described by herself and everyone around her as that term more associated with the Manic Pixie Dream Girl than perhaps any other, impulsive."
Mhm.
Um, which again is why she did the situation. She just gets in a car and drives off to who knows where. She just always needs activity, attention. Like, if we're going manic, she definitely
She leans into the
was,
manic of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope,
yes.
yeah.
Feeling a little maybe undiagnosed bipolar
Yeah.
or multiple person. Like, there's a lot happening that she's not addressing. And instead she's trying to coat over with excitement and alcohol and other
Yeah.
ways of distracting herself from herself. Like that anxiety of like, I'm not doing the best with the time that I have has was quirky at first, in this way of inviting him to start taking up more of his life. But then you're like, oh no, this is a literal anxiety that she has. And
All the
so
time, yeah.
she needs to make the voices quiet. So she's very
Yeah.
loud, but even more damning is Clementine's own resistance to the manic pixie label, even before the label is named. So she explains to Joel in the beginning of their first relationship that she is aware of the image that she leaves and the expectations that others put on her. And she says, "Too many guys think I'm a concept, or I complete them, or I'm going to make them alive. But I'm just a effed up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind. Don't assign me yours," which I really
Mhm.
appreciated. Like, she, is both like aware of these things, but then also falling prey to it quite often.
Yeah.
Patrick is definitely doing this to her. Like, he is
Yeah.
100% being that person. And while Joel is losing his grip on his memories, he remembers this conversation. And though then Joel works to dissuade Clem's fears, current Joel knows better, saying, "I still thought you would save me." So even though he was reassuring her at the time, like, "Oh no, it's not going to be like that. Like, I respect
Yeah.
you as your own human being." Inside, he knew he was actually really looking at her to do that. And losing that, like, understanding is one of the core problems, because, like, without his memories, he wouldn't know that he had done that. So he's going to repeat that
Yeah.
whole thing, which is, I'll get there. But um, even in the midst of him erasing her, he relies on her, or at least his idea of Clementine. So I found that the version of Clementine that I liked seeing, the one that I felt like they made the most sense, like, the only time I felt like they were actually good together was when it was the made up Clementine.
In his
That
mind,
was
yeah, that doesn't
his
exist.
version of her. It's like that
Yeah.
Rick and Morty episode, where they make, like, the ideal versions, or not the
Mhm.
ideal, but the versions of themselves, and then they put, um, they put the thing on her ideal version of the husband, and he
Mhm.
envisions this, like, ideal version of her because that's what she would have wanted. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 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 it's when they go to couples therapy, and it's
Yeah.
like and the whole thing is that they're creating all these and then they make these monsters, and it's terrifying.
Yeah. And that's kind of what it is. Like, he made this, not a monster, but his ideal Clementine, and that's the best relationship he had. All the other
Mhm.
ones were, like, cute, sure, but I never felt like they really made sense. I was like, "He's really boring, and she clearly needs help," and I don't think they're doing that for each other.
Yeah.
Which is like, people are gonna people. But when he made this version of herself, I was like, "This is the cutest that they've ever been," and it's literally his imagining of what she would do. So it's kind of like WWCD. What would
Mhm.
Clementine do? So he invents this version of her in his mind and enlists her to help to stop the erasure after experiencing those first moments of love once again. So he realizes he doesn't want to lose her. This is a bad mistake, and they're not listening up top. So, he tries to stop the process in a different way.
Mhm.
Um, and he sees her as he had when they first began, and it inspires him to fight for her, for them, and what they had hoped to be. In an article on Cinephile Fix titled Film Analysis Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, they summarize the power of the imagined Clementine quite well, saying, when they challenge the erasing process by hiding in childhood remembrances and other off the map memories, the escape route is always suggested by Clementine. Joel would never arrive to such conclusions himself, but he subconsciously asks himself, what would Clementine do, and acts upon it. So when she whispers that final line inside his head, what he's really doing is implanting an impulse, something Lacuna can't touch, and something he wouldn't have done. Right?
Mhm.
Like, he's like, Clementine, like, she's always like, what if we do this? What if we go to your childhood? What if we go to a repressed memory? What if we go to an embarrassed memory? Um, and she's always like taking him. The baby Joel moments are kind of the best. She's like, baby Joel.
Yeah. Well, it's also
What's
just,
wrong?
like, very much he needs therapy to deal with the issues that he has with his mother, and that is not her problem to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause he's like, she won't hug
Um,
me. She won't pay
yeah,
attention to
clearly
me.
has, like, issues that he needs to work through. It's,
Yeah.
like, such a thing. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and I think that's such an interesting thing for, like, he wouldn't have ever thought to look there, right?
Mhm.
But
I
his
don't even know if he
Clementine would.
learned anything, so it's fine, it's fine.
But the procedure clearly isn't flawless and reveals that relationships leave something deep and ingrained within us, a mark that can't be erased. And we see this with the side plot of Kirsten Dunst's character, a young employee of the memory erasing agency Lacuna. And I've found a cool fact here that the term lacunar amnesia refers to the condition in which someone loses memory of a particular thing or event. So it's
Oh,
like,
fun.
that's probably where it came from.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Dunst, Mary has a girlish crush on her boss, Dr. Mearswiak,
Mhm.
and he is a man who's much older than her, and to her, like, charmingly wizened, right? Like, she quotes all these, like, authors, not very well, right? But when she's doing that to her current boyfriend, the Hulk, she is, telling him, and it just kind of goes over his head. Like,
Yeah.
he's not philosophical in that way. He's, technologically smart because he can, do this
Alter people's
equipment,
minds, yeah.
um, which is wild. But he's not satisfying that part of her that's, like, curious,
Mhm.
and attracted to intelligence. And when she starts, quoting those things, of course he knows. And so she's just like, she's, in love with this, like, older man that's has this ideal, and in a desperate move she kisses him, and it's revealed to her that they've been here before,
Mhm.
um that they had previously been together, and she asked to have the procedure. I don't think that's what happens.
Yeah.
Later, Mary finds her own tape of her recorded interview before the procedure, and in a truly Hills Like White Elephants conversation, Mary explains how the affair started, and her voice is frail and uncertain as Dr. Mirziak coaxes her forward. And I say Hills Like White Elephants, I think, Joel, who loves people who read books, would appreciate the Hemingway reference,
Uh-huh.
um, in which it's a short story and they're having a very plain conversation, but clearly what they're actually talking about is an abortion.
Mm,
And that's what it felt like. It felt
got
like
you.
an older man coaxing his mistress to have an abortion.
Yeah.
What he's doing, like that's what it felt like, and it's like like two sentences, but you can see that she's like uncertain, and
Yeah.
she's still like in this fantasy element of their relationship, and he's like, no, you have to. You
Yeah.
wanted this, and later when she asked, like, did I look happy when you assumed I was together with him? She was.
Yeah.
So you know so then Mary then figures out that she had been happy at that time, and the idea of erasing someone from your life is cruel and unusual punishment, and so she mails everyone's tapes to them to reveal what they had lost.
Mhm.
um and we actually see throughout how the eraser has greatly impacted Clementine's already fragile mental state. The
Mhm.
missing moments and the holes left behind are nagging at her, and she's convinced something is wrong. And especially because we don't quite, or I don't remember how much time they said these two were together, but she is
Yeah.
definitely at this point in her life where she would have aged, like in a
I
way
think
that's
it was
very
2
visible.
years. Yeah, I think it was 2 years
Two
based on what
years.
they said, and that they had, like, lived together and, like, all because he said in his journal, Joel specifically, said
Mhm.
he had 2 years where he didn't write anything, and that's because all the pages were ripped out.
Oh, right, you're so right.
Yeah.
Still, that's like right? Like, you would
Yeah.
look in the mirror and you look different. And all of that time, like, you've lived together with this person, so much of your life was this person, you have lost 2 years of your life. So you're waking
Mhm.
up 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And now who is that? Like there's no way that your brain is like cool, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be that nagging, there's going to feel like there's these missing moments, the holes that are left behind, and they're nagging at her and she's convinced that something is wrong.
Yeah.
And our relationships, even the dark and harmful ones, are a part of us. They are growth in our journeys and we don't need them, but we have lived them. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that's really important because I remember a discourse online during Game of Thrones when Sansa had that really horrible arc that was just written in for stupid reasons in the show where she was being abused. And
Mm.
she had this whole conversation where she was like, it made me stronger. And everyone's like, no, no, that's not,
Yeah.
we're not doing that. And I completely agree. I don't think like people need to be abused and need to like some people need to forget, right? If
Yeah.
something terrible has happened to you, some that's how you protect yourself. Absolutely okay. But I do think like we have lived them, right? Like I don't think you deserve anything terrible to happen to you, but had those things happen to you, it is a part of what your life is. It is a part of who you are going to become. And sometimes we just have to reconcile that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that they're missing. And
Mhm.
if we could just erase those things, like who are we? If I didn't go through all the terrible things I went through in any of my bad relationships, I would not be who I am and would not have been the partner that I am to my partner. Like I wouldn't
Mhm.
be ready for what I'm about to
Yeah,
do, right?
there's a lot of
Like,
growth that happened in the middle space so that you are okay to
yeah.
be in this situation so you don't make the same mistakes.
I
Yeah.
would hate to be stuck in like this revolving door of like me still being the worst version of myself who allows myself to keep getting into these situations, right? Because there was a
Yeah.
certain person of me who would have found Joel's, right? Who would have been the manic pixie dream girl for these Joel's. And I would have just kept doing it if I didn't learn to not do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we see. Anyway, the beginning of the film finds Joel in an act of unlikely spontaneity where he ditches work and he runs off to the cold beach of Montauk. And this is because we learn later, he that was one of the little whisperings, right? So here he meets Clementine, not knowing this is a second first meeting, and they keep catching each other's eyes, but never interacting until they're on their way home when Clem pounces on Joel, manically chatting away about hair dye color names. And Joel feels the soft pangs of interest, the desire and attraction still there. And they end
Yeah.
up in a new affair, discovering each other for this first time. Um, though the blissful beginnings is stopped short by the discovery of their tapes. And with them, they hear the worst of each other. They see what they had become and what they'll eventually believe of each other. And Clem again mentions her manic pixie dream girl worries, knowing he will get tired of her, knowing he'll say these terrible things about her. Like we didn't hear all
Yeah.
of her tape, but her tape was like, he's boring. I don't like what he made me become. Right?
Yeah.
Like he's just like he doesn't do it for me. I want fun. And then his is like absolutely destroying her whole entire character. And also like insinuates things about her that I never ever like every time he said it, I was like, what? Where are
Yeah,
you
I mean,
getting that?
they were together for 2 years, and it seemed like at no point in that entire time period did he actually even kind of get to know her. Like, maybe
Yeah.
her likes in jewelry, sure.
Yeah, yeah, he
Sure.
did. He did
On
figure
a
that out.
superficial, like, "Oh, I noticed her fashion
Mhm.
interests." Maybe. But, like, at no point did he ever actively or accurately interpret why she did things, who she was, or, like, any positive things about her other than,
Yeah.
like, she's fun, spontaneous, and whatever. It's the whole time.
Yeah, I think the one time I would say where I felt like they were connected was when he called her Tangerine, and it's when she colored her hair into the Agent Orange, and they're like laughing, and it's very clear like he this is like a thing that they have, right?
Mhm.
And it's cute, it's playful, and he has this name for her, and it felt really authentic and nice for them. But I do agree, it felt like Kat and I both mentioned it. It felt a bit like this whole Miley Cyrus Liam Hemsworth situation, and Clem should have just been out buying her own flowers, okay?
Mhm.
Like, it's definitely him being like, "Could you just
Just
not be so
behave.
much." Yeah, just
Yeah,
behave.
for once.
Um,
Ugh.
I've been there. Um, you do.
I hate it
Uh,
so hard.
it's totally, right? And I think, yeah, I think they didn't really ever get to that point, so I totally agree. Um, but at the
Sorry.
end, Clem, after they hear these horrible things about each other and what they said about each other, so, like, you also have to understand, like, they're hearing themselves say that too, and that's really rough. Because
Mhm.
like, who hasn't said really horrible things about the person right after a breakup? Especially when you're in, like, that state where that person just forgot about you, you're gonna get angry. Some people get really vicious in that way.
Yeah.
And so they just have to see each other at their worst, and they just met. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
You
So
don't even have
this
any of the love armor yet, like,
shook,
it's
yeah.
literally
I don't know you, but you were saying stuff about
yeah,
and so Clem mentions, I'm not gonna fix you, like, I got my own stuff. She almost says it verbatim, like, it's a
yeah.
thing she has to say a lot, right? And, Joel once again says he won't let that happen, and we're left wondering if he means it or if in the end he'll find that he was, once again, still hoping she'd save him.
Mhm.
Because in the end, in their second first meeting, they were still very much the broken people they'd been at the start.
Yeah.
The revolving door, right? They are vulnerable and hurt, yearning for someone to fill the holes they feel inside. Only now they know that those holes are shaped like each other. And I read somewhere that a previous iteration of the script featured an older Clementine coming in for the procedure for the 15th time, showing that simply erasing someone isn't enough. Like it just showed, like it was a kind of a framing of it where here it is again, right? They just keep,
Mhm.
in this cycle of unhappiness and never learning from their mistakes or working on it in a healthy way. And I think I would have preferred that framing to some degree. I think it totally works the way that it does because it is kind of open ended and you don't really know if them knowing how it ended is going to affect how it goes, right?
Yeah.
Like if someone told me all the worst things about me and without having to actively feel the harm that came with that before, um I don't know. Because they don't know what the argument was. They don't know what happened. They don't know that they were both the worst people in the world. They just know that they both thought that of each other.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that uh, it would have been interesting to see the persistence and the doom of a flawed relationship, that simply knowing why something ended isn't enough to not have it end again, or that erasing the pain and darkness of a relationship won't doom you to repeat it. Um, I don't think we need bad things to happen to us, but bad things do happen to us. And when they do, we need to carry those memories with everything else because it becomes a part of us and who we will be. And that Cinephile article sums up this feeling quite well, saying, letting go is one of the hardest things a person can do. It doesn't mean they're giving up, it means they're moving on. We hold on to things we value as if they will cease to exist when we let go. But the truth is, they won't. Letting go or giving up isn't an act of cowardice. Quite often, it's an act of supreme bravery. An eternal sunshine of the spotless mind tells us to accept things as they are and make the most of what we have when all hope is lost. And our ends are just as important as our beginnings.
Yeah. I don't know. Your whole thing made me realize the reason I maybe didn't like this movie as much as I didn't like it is because I just really disliked Joel. Um, and that's its own thing. I've met Joels.
Yeah,
I met many Joels.
yeah, yeah.
And they suck. It's yeah, it just
They
it's
do.
there's this like false thing where they like think they know a person and they just don't even just take the time or energy to actually get to know a person. So all their like little hot takes are just super unseasoned.
Yeah, well,
And
I
not
mean
accurate most of the time. And yeah, they're just saying all the things like your insecure mind will say about yourself, but it doesn't make those things true.
mhm,
Um,
yeah,
I
but
don't
I
know.
mean, also, like, it is saying something that he's someone who's aware enough to ponder, right? Like, he's aware that he's boring. He knows that, right? He knows he's missing something and he's talking about it. And I think
Yeah.
that's something. Like, and that's I mean, it's not the last step, but it's certainly a first step. But I also think it's important, like, in disliking Joel, to also dislike Clementine.
Oh, I
She
also
was
very
such a
much dislike
problem.
Clementine. I
She was an
disliked everyone in
entire
this
problem.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she was an entire problem too. I just think that yeah. Oh, I just don't
I
think
get
they should have been
you're
together, and it
allowed. You're
makes me
allowed.
so mad, and it's fine.
And I think that's
Um,
totally valid because again, it's like I don't think and, whatever. I can imagine people who would get this procedure
oh,
were
for
it to
sure.
exist,
Yeah,
and if
young me even.
I would have been in it, I would have been. I don't. I have a very bad memory. It's almost like I have this procedure done to me all the time. People ask
Yeah,
me things constantly. They'll be like, "Do you remember that time?" Nope. Don't. If you start a sentence with "Do you remember?" The answer is no. I do not remember literally anything. I can tell you what I did yesterday, and
yeah,
don't take it personally, please. Like,
yeah. No, it's like a real thing,
I
and
can't retain
our brains
memories.
will do that as a defense mechanism, which I'll get into a little bit, but it's like it is a really big thing where it's just like you see these 2 people who are very flawed, and they're making it each other's problems, and it's also just like young me, I understand, did not have the growth, you know?
Mhm.
Young me probably would have been like, "Heck yeah, you want me to forget?" And, like, little did they know it would go
I was
away
gonna
by
do it.
itself eventually
Gonna
because
do
my
it
memory is
myself.
made of garbage. But, like, it's super real, and, like, you realize that even if you're not getting this procedure, you may cope with these things in different ways. So Clementine, before she gets this procedure, is actively coping with this with alcohol.
Mhm.
So like that was one of my coping mechanisms for a very long time as well. I think it's a very early 2000. It's still anytime you could be
Yeah.
coping with like toxic things that you shouldn't be coping with. But I just know that
Mhm.
like young me also used that as a coping mechanism, and it led me to places that were very unhealthy and did not encourage growth, but did make me
Mhm.
forget stuff. And that was kind of cool for a minute. But like, people are going to deal with things how they deal with them. And this was very realistic. Did I
Yeah.
think these characters were realistic? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But did I like them? No.
I don't think
Did I
you were
like
supposed to.
did I like their journey? Not really. I don't know if they really had a journey. Like,
That's yeah. Kinda, kinda.
kinda.
But they don't retain the journey. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
just someone
Whole
telling you
thing
your
yeah,
stuff
no.
doesn't mean you know it now.
Well, yeah, it's a very unique thing as a human person to learn from other people's mistakes. And when you separate yourself from your own mistakes, you don't learn from them because it is the same thing as witnessing someone else make that mistake and being like, I get it, but I want to see what happens when I do it. You know what I mean? Because that's
Yeah.
like a natural human thing to like not learn from other people's actions. You have to learn from yourself. People have to make their own mistakes. And when you separate yourself from your own mistakes, you just totally take away all the learning and growth that comes with it. So that's my little 2 cents.